My grandfather asked in astonishment, "Hey, pal, why did you arrive by cab? What became of the BMW we gifted you for your 21st birthday?" Before I could respond, my mom smiled and said, "That car is her sister's now." My grandfather went quiet for a moment, lost in thought. And what he did next made me genuinely proud of him. The taxi pulled away, leaving me exposed on the familiar, imposing driveway. I was heading into a family gathering, a place that once felt safe, but now, without my car, the car that was mine, I knew I was walking into a battle for my very self-worth. The grand, imposing house looked exactly as I remembered it, with manicured hedges and that fountain where I'd tossed pennies as a kid. It felt like walking toward an execution, not a comforting home. My grandfather, Arthur, was already on the front steps, his face shifting from a welcoming smile to utter confusion in an instant. He's 78, still sharp as a tack, with those piercing blue eyes that miss nothing. "Chloe, sweetheart." He came down to hug me, then pulled back, his gaze going past me to the empty driveway. "Wait a minute. Where's the BMW? Did something happen to it? Is it in the shop?" Before I could even speak, my mother, Eleanor's voice cut through the air from the doorway. Of course, she'd been watching, timing her entrance perfectly. "Oh, Dad, didn't I tell you?" Her smile was sickeningly sweet, the kind that made my skin crawl. "The car belongs to Maya now." It just made more sense that way. The words just hung there, heavy in the air. My grandfather's face cycled through confusion, then disbelief, and finally, a hard, cold anger I'd only seen a few times. He looked at me, then at Eleanor, then back to me. "Come inside, Chloe," he said, his voice surprisingly quiet. "We need to talk." My grandmother, Susan, was in the living room. The moment her eyes met mine, she knew. She always had that ability, reading people like open books. Eleanor followed us in, still wearing that smug, satisfied smirk, completely oblivious to the storm she'd just walked into. "Start from the beginning," Arthur commanded, settling into his worn leather armchair. "And I want the whole story." So, I told them everything. It started when I was 14. Eleanor had always made it abundantly clear that my younger sister, Maya, was her favorite. Maya could do no wrong. Every small accomplishment was celebrated. Every failure was excused or blamed on outside forces. Me? I was the disappointment. The one who never quite measured up, no matter how hard I tried. When I got into nursing school at 21, my grandparents were ecstatic. They'd always supported my dreams of working in healthcare, of helping people. They gave me that sleek black BMW as a birthday present, telling me how proud they were, how much they believed in me. It was more than just a car, it was validation, proof that someone saw my worth. But Eleanor saw it differently. Within a month, her campaign began. Maya, she argued, needed a car for her daily commute to the university across town. She said public transportation wasn't safe. The used sedan my parents bought her kept breaking down. It would just be temporary, my mother insisted, until they could afford something better. And besides, didn't I live close enough to the hospital to take the bus? I said no. I said no at least a dozen times. The car was a gift from my grandparents to me, and I needed it for my early morning shifts and late-night rotations. But Eleanor was relentless. She enlisted my father, Daniel, who gave me disappointed lectures about family and selfishness. She had Maya crying at the dinner table, claiming she felt unsafe on public transit. Eleanor turned every family gathering into a referendum on my character. "You're being so selfish," she'd declare in front of everyone. "Your sister needs this more than you do. You only care about yourself." The breaking point came 3 months ago. I just worked a brutal double shift in the ICU, 16 hours on my feet, dealing with a night where we'd lost 2 patients. I came home emotionally drained, exhausted, wanting nothing more than to collapse. Instead, I found Eleanor and Maya in my apartment. They'd used the spare key I'd given my parents for emergencies. My car keys were clutched in Eleanor's hand. "We're taking the BMW," she announced. "Maya has an important presentation tomorrow morning, and her car died again. You can take the bus to work." I was too tired to fight. Too worn down from months of constant pressure and guilt trips. I just let them take the keys. I told myself it would just be for a day or two. That was 3 months ago. I never got my car back. Every time I asked, Eleanor had an excuse. Maya needed it for a job interview. Maya needed it for a weekend trip. Maya needed it because she was going through a hard time with her boyfriend and deserved something nice. Eventually, Eleanor stopped making excuses altogether. "The car is Maya's now," she told me flatly when I confronted her last month. "She needs it more than you do. You're just going to have to accept that." I'd tried to explain all of this to my parents before, but they wouldn't listen. Daniel just shrugged, telling me to work it out with my mother. My Aunt Bethany told me I was being dramatic when I called her crying one night. Even some extended family members seemed to think I was making a big deal out of nothing. "It's just a car," they'd say. "Family is more important." But it wasn't just a car. It was the culmination of 25 years of being treated as less than, of watching my sister get everything handed to her while I worked myself to exhaustion for scraps of approval. It was about respect, autonomy, and the fact that something given to me as a gift had been stolen and redistributed without my consent. The pattern had started so early, I couldn't even pinpoint the exact beginning. I remember being 7 years old, bringing home a math test with a perfect score. Eleanor glanced at it, said "good job," and stuck it on the fridge. When Maya brought home a C+ on her spelling test that same week, my mother threw her a little celebration with her favorite cookies and called my grandmother to brag about how hard Maya had worked. In middle school, I made the honor roll every single semester. My parents came to exactly one award ceremony in 3 years. Maya joined the drama club and had a minor role in the school play. They attended every single performance, brought flowers, and took her out to dinner to celebrate. When I asked why they hadn't made such a fuss about my academics, Eleanor said grades were expected from me, while Maya's participation in drama was brave and special. High school brought more of the same. I worked part-time at a local grocery store to save for college, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and volunteered at a nursing home because I knew I wanted to work in healthcare. Maya got mediocre grades, didn't work, and spent most of her time with friends. Yet, when it came time to discuss college, my parents sat me down and explained that they could only afford to help one of us significantly, and Maya needed the support more because she wasn't as naturally capable as I was. The twisted logic made my head spin. I was being punished for being responsible. My competence had become the justification for giving me less. I took out student loans and worked my way through nursing school. I lived in a cramped apartment with 3 roommates, ate ramen more nights than I care to remember, and pulled all-nighters studying between shifts as a nursing assistant. Meanwhile, Maya lived in a nice apartment my parents helped pay for, got a reliable used car when she turned 19, and had spending money for concerts and trips. When I graduated from nursing school, my parents came to the ceremony, but left immediately because they had dinner plans. My grandparents, though, they took me out to celebrate. They told me how proud they were, how impressed they were by my dedication and work ethic. A week later, they showed up at my apartment with a BMW, a sleek black 3 Series with 10 leather interior. "Every nurse needs reliable transportation," Arthur had said, handing me the keys, "especially one who works the hours you do. We don't want you stranded or unsafe." I cried. It was the first time in years that someone had prioritized my needs, had seen my struggles, and tried to ease them without attaching conditions or comparisons. Eleanor's reaction when she found out about the car was immediate and cold. She called me that same evening, her voice tight. "That's a very generous gift. I hope you thank them properly." "Of course I did," I said, confused by her tone. "Good, because your grandparents don't have unlimited resources, you know. They can't just be buying expensive cars for everyone." The implication was clear: I'd taken something that could have gone to Maya. Never mind that my grandparents had their own money and could do whatever they wanted with it. Never mind that this was a gift specifically given to me for my accomplishments. In Eleanor's mind, anything good that came to me was somehow stolen from my sister. The first time Eleanor suggested I let Maya borrow the car, I'd laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. Maya's used sedan had broken down for the second time that month, and my mother thought it would be sisterly of me to share. I explained that I needed my car for work, that I couldn't rely on public transportation for my early morning and late night shifts. Eleanor had sighed dramatically and said something about how I'd always been the stubborn one. Then came the guilt trips. Every family dinner became an opportunity for my mother to mention how difficult Maya's commute was, how worried she was about her youngest daughter's safety, how unfortunate it was that some people had nice things while others struggled. She never said my name, but everyone knew who she meant. Maya, to her credit, seemed uncomfortable at first, but as weeks turned into months, she started joining in. "Must be nice to have such a reliable car," she'd say wistfully within earshot of Eleanor. "I never know if my car is going to start in the morning." Daniel's approach was different, but equally frustrating. He'd pull me aside and ask if I couldn't just help out my sister temporarily. "You're always so capable," he'd say. "You could figure out the bus system. Maya isn't as adaptable as you are." There was that word again, capable. It had become a weapon, a reason why I should accept less, accommodate more, shrink myself to make room for my sister's needs. I held firm for months. The car was mine, a gift from my grandparents, and I needed it. But the pressure was relentless. Every phone call, every family gathering, every text message seemed to circle back to the same topic. Eleanor even recruited extended family members to her cause. Aunt Bethany started making comments about how family should help each other. A cousin I barely knew sent me a long message about the importance of sisterly bonds. The isolation was suffocating. It felt like everyone had decided I was the villain for wanting to keep something that belonged to me. Eleanor was a master at playing the victim, sighing about how worried she was, how she just wanted both her daughters to be safe and happy. She made it sound so reasonable, so loving. Anyone who didn't know the full context would think I was being needlessly difficult. Work became my refuge. At the hospital, I was valued for my skills and dedication. My supervisor, Sarah, who had been a nurse for 20 years, noticed my work ethic and started mentoring me. She'd gone through her own family struggles and recognized the signs of someone carrying too much weight. "You look exhausted," she said one day during a break. "And not just physically." "What's going on?" I broke down and told her everything. She listened without judgment, then said something that stuck with me: "People who love you don't make you feel guilty for having boundaries. Remember that." But boundaries were hard to maintain when I was being attacked from all sides. Eleanor escalated her tactics. She started showing up at my apartment unannounced, always with some excuse: she was in the neighborhood, she wanted to drop off leftovers, she missed me. But the real agenda was always the same: pressure me about the car. During one of these visits, she went through my mail uninvited and found a bank statement showing that I'd been approved for a credit card with a decent limit. "See," she said triumphantly. "You're doing fine financially. You could afford to take Ubers to work if Maya needed the car. She's drowning in expenses and doesn't have this kind of cushion." The invasion of privacy should have been the final straw, but I was too tired to fight. I worked 50 to 60 hours a week at the hospital, dealing with life and death situations, comforting patients and families through their worst moments. Coming home to more conflict felt unbearable. Then came the night that changed everything. The night I was too exhausted to fight back. I'd been assigned to the ICU for a particularly brutal shift. We had a teenage car accident victim who didn't make it, and an elderly patient who coded twice before we finally stabilized him. By hour 14, I was running on fumes and automatic responses. When I finally clocked out, I discovered I'd missed 17 calls and 32 text messages, all from Eleanor and Maya. My sister's car had died again, this time in a parking lot across town. She needed to get home and then to her early class the next morning. Eleanor demanded I come immediately with my car so Maya could take it. I was so tired I could barely see straight. I took the bus home, a 45-minute journey that felt like hours. And when I walked into my apartment, they were already there waiting. Finally, Eleanor said, as if I'd been out having fun instead of saving lives. Maya needs to leave in 10 minutes to make it home at a reasonable hour. I must have looked as dead as I felt because even Maya seemed slightly concerned. You okay? She asked. Double shift. Lost a patient. Need to sleep. Well, this will only take a minute, Eleanor said, holding out her hand expectantly. Keys, please. And that's when I should have said no. That's when I should have put my foot down, told them both to leave, and locked the door behind them. Instead, I was so depleted, so worn down by months of constant pressure, that I just handed over the keys. I told myself it would be easier to deal with it tomorrow after I'd slept. Just for tonight, I mumbled. I need it back tomorrow afternoon for my next shift. Of course, Eleanor said, but there was something in her smile that should have warned me. Tomorrow afternoon came and went. I texted Maya asking when I could pick up the car. She responded that she needed it for a few more days. Job interviews, she claimed. Eleanor backed her up, saying it would be cruel to take away transportation when Maya was trying to improve her employment situation. A few days turned into a week. A week turned into 2 weeks. Every request for my car back was met with another excuse, another reason why Maya needed it just a little longer. I started taking Ubers to work, watching my savings dwindle with each ride. I brought up getting my car back at family dinner, and Eleanor acted like I was being unreasonable. She's trying to get a job, Chloe. Don't you want your sister to succeed? I want my car back. The one that was given to me as a gift. It's just temporary. Why are you being so inflexible? The gaslighting was masterful. Somehow, my wanting my own property returned had become the problem, not the fact that it had been taken without real permission. By week 3, I'd escalated to demanding the car back, my voice firm and my language clear. Eleanor's response was to stop answering my calls. Daniel, when I reached him, said I was creating unnecessary drama and should be more understanding of my sister's needs. I called Aunt Bethany, hoping for support, but she'd already been primed by Eleanor's version of events. You have a stable job and income, she told me. Maya is struggling to find her footing. Can't you be generous? This isn't about generosity, I tried to explain. This is about something that belongs to me being taken and not returned. You're being selfish. It's just a car. I hung up on her. I was done explaining myself to people who refused to listen. Month 2 arrived, and I'd resigned myself to using public transportation and the occasional Uber. The financial strain was significant, but more painful was the emotional realization that my family cared so little about my well-being. Every time I saw Maya's social media posts, pictures of her out with friends, my car visible in the background, it felt like a slap in the face. I considered reporting it stolen, but the thought of getting my own family in legal trouble made me sick. I consulted with a coworker who had a lawyer friend, and they explained that because I'd technically given permission initially and hadn't formally demanded its return in writing, the legal situation was murky. You need to send a certified letter demanding the return of your property, the lawyer advised. Give them a deadline. If they don't comply, then you can involve the police. I drafted the letter, but never sent it. Some part of me kept hoping my family would come to their senses, that they'd recognize how wrong this was and return my car with an apology. I was still hoping for a reconciliation that would never come on their terms. My grandfather, Arthur, sat quietly through the entire story, his expression growing darker with each detail. My grandmother, Susan, had tears in her eyes. Eleanor, who'd been listening with increasing discomfort, tried to interject several times. Dad, you don't understand. Maya really needed, "Be quiet, Eleanor." My grandfather's voice was ice. "I'm not talking to you right now." She actually fell silent, shocked. I'd never heard him speak to her that way. He turned to me. "Where's the title to the car?" "Still in my name, technically," I said. "I never signed it over." I didn't even know they'd basically taken it permanently until it was too late to fight about it. Arthur stood up. He was a tall man, and even at his age, he had presence. "Susan, get me my phone." "Eleanor, you're going to sit right there and not say a word." "Chloe, I need you to give me Maya's current address." What happened next was swift and surgical. My grandfather called his lawyer first, a man named Michaelchin, who'd handled the family's legal affairs for decades. He explained the situation in crisp, clear terms. Then he called a towing company he knew and arranged for the BMW to be recovered from Maya's apartment complex that very afternoon. "But Dad, you can't just," Eleanor started. "I absolutely can. The car is registered to Chloe. What you did is called theft, Eleanor. I don't care if you're family. You stole a gift that your mother and I gave to your daughter and you gave it to her sister. We're correcting that mistake right now." Eleanor's face went white. "You're embarrassing Maya. Everyone will see the car being towed." "Good. Maybe she'll learn something about taking things that don't belong to her." While we waited for confirmation that the car had been recovered, my grandfather sat down with my grandmother, and they had a quiet conversation I couldn't quite hear. Eleanor was on her phone, frantically texting, probably warning Maya about what was coming. 2 hours later, I got a text from an unknown number, the tow truck driver. "BMW secured. Where do you want it delivered?" I gave him my address, hardly believing this was happening. My phone immediately started blowing up with calls from Maya and Eleanor, which I ignored. But Arthur wasn't finished. He called my father next, putting him on speakerphone. "Daniel, this is Arthur. I'm calling to let you know that the car Susan and I gave to Chloe has been returned to her where it belongs. I'm also calling to tell you that your behavior in this situation has been completely unacceptable. You stood by while your wife stole from your own daughter and made her feel worthless in her own family." Daniel tried to sputter some excuse, but my grandfather cut him off. "I don't want to hear it. Here's what's going to happen. Susan and I are updating our will this week. Eleanor's inheritance is being significantly reduced. That money will be placed in a trust for Chloe instead, which she'll receive when we pass. Additionally, we're setting up a separate fund for her now, enough to cover any expenses she has while she finishes her nursing residency and gets on her feet. Consider it reparations for years of terrible parenting." I gasped. "Grandpa, you don't have to." He held up his hand. "Yes, I do. Your grandmother and I have watched this favoritism for too long. We kept hoping your mother would grow out of it, that she'd see what she was doing to you. But she hasn't, and we're not going to enable it anymore." Eleanor was crying now, ugly, angry tears. "You're punishing me for trying to help both my daughters. You're choosing Chloe over me." "No," my grandmother said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was firm but sad. "We're correcting an imbalance that you created. We love both our granddaughters, Eleanor. But you clearly don't, and that breaks my heart." The implications of that statement hung in the air. Eleanor looked like she'd been slapped. The room fell into a tense silence after my grandmother's words. I could see Eleanor processing what had just happened, her face cycling through shock, anger, and something that might have been shame if she'd been capable of genuine self-reflection. My grandfather wasn't done. He pulled out a small notebook from his jacket pocket. He'd always been the type to keep meticulous records and flipped through several pages. "Do you want to know what finally made me realize how serious this was?" he asked, looking directly at Eleanor. "It wasn't just today. Susan and I have been keeping track for the past 5 years. We thought maybe we were imagining things, that we were being oversensitive because we're old, so we wrote it down. He adjusted his reading glasses and began recounting entries. June 2020, Chloe graduates nursing school with honors. We attend her graduation. Eleanor and Daniel arrive late, leave immediately after the ceremony, don't attend any celebration. November 2020, Maya changes her college major for the third time. Eleanor posts on social media about how proud she is of Maya's journey of self-discovery and shares 12 photos from a celebratory dinner. Eleanor opened her mouth to protest, but Arthur continued. March 2021, Chloe is promoted to a specialized position in the ICU after only 8 months, something her supervisor told us typically takes several years. We called to congratulate her. Eleanor, when we mention it, says that's nice and changes the subject to talk about Maya's new boyfriend. May 2021, Maya fails 2 classes and needs an extra semester to graduate. Eleanor spends 3 hours on the phone with us explaining all the reasons it wasn't Maya's fault. Bad professors, unfair grading, personal stress. I'd never realized my grandparents had been paying such close attention. Hearing it all laid out chronologically was jarring. Each example alone seemed small, potentially explainable. Together, they formed an undeniable pattern. September 2021, we give Chloe the BMW for her birthday. Within a week, Eleanor calls us asking if we'd considered that Maya might also need help with transportation. December 2021, Chloe works through Christmas Day at the hospital because several nurses called in sick. Eleanor complains at Christmas dinner that Chloe always prioritizes work over family and ruins holidays. Maya, who slept until noon, is praised for bringing such wonderful energy to the celebration. My grandmother picked up where my grandfather left off, her voice steady but sad. February 2022, Chloe mentioned she's been having trouble sleeping due to stress from work and family pressure. I suggest she talk to her mother about it. Eleanor's response, which Chloe told me about later, was that stress is part of being an adult and that she needs to toughen up. That same month, Maya has a minor disagreement with her roommate. Eleanor drives across town at midnight to comfort her and brings her home to stay for a week. My mother found her voice shrill and defensive. You're taking everything out of context. You're making me sound like a monster. I love both my daughters equally. Then show it, my grandfather said simply. Because for years, your actions have told a different story. He closed the notebook and set it on the table between us. This isn't about the car, Eleanor. The car is just the breaking point. This is about 25 years of making one daughter feel invisible, while the other gets unconditional support and endless second chances. Chloe has worked herself to exhaustion, trying to earn a fraction of the attention and approval you give Maya freely. That's not fair, Eleanor protested. Chloe never needed me the way Maya does. She's always been independent, always figured things out on her own. Maya needs more support. Do you hear yourself? My grandmother asked gently. You're saying you mistreated one daughter because she was competent enough to survive the mistreatment. That's not parenting, Eleanor. That's failing the child who made it easiest for you. The words landed like physical blows. I'd never heard anyone articulate exactly what I'd felt my entire life. I'd been punished for being low maintenance, for not demanding attention, for making Eleanor's life easier by requiring less. My grandfather stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden before turning back to face us. When Chloe was 16, she won a scholarship competition. Do you remember that, Eleanor? My mother frowned vaguely. It was a $5,000 scholarship for an essay about community service. She'd been volunteering at that nursing home for 2 years by then. The award ceremony was on a Tuesday evening in April. Chloe asked if you'd come. Do you remember what you said? My mother was silent. You said you couldn't make it because Maya had a friend coming over for a school project and you needed to be home to supervise. Chloe told us she understood that it wasn't a big deal. But Susan and I went to that ceremony. We watched Chloe walk up on stage to accept her award and shake hands with the judges. She was beaming with pride. Then we watched her face scan the audience, looking for you. The moment she realized you weren't there, something dimmed in her eyes. I'd forgotten about that night. Or maybe I'd buried it. But hearing my grandfather describe it brought everything back, the excitement I felt writing that essay, the hope that maybe this achievement would be significant enough to get Eleanor's attention, the crushing disappointment when she didn't show. She was 16 years old, my grandmother added softly. She won a competitive scholarship against applicants from across the state, and her own mother couldn't be bothered to show up. But 3 weeks later, you took a half-day off work to attend Maya's spring concert where she sang backup in one song. I don't have to justify every parenting decision I made to you, Eleanor said, but her voice lacked conviction. No, you don't, my grandfather agreed. But you do need to understand that decisions have consequences. Chloe has spent her entire life accommodating everyone else's needs. Bending over backward to be easy, asking for nothing. And the one time she had something that was truly hers, you took it and gave it away like it meant nothing. He moved to stand beside my chair, his hand resting protectively on my shoulder. What you did with that car wasn't about transportation or helping Maya. It was about reminding Chloe that even the gifts she receives, even the recognition she earns, can be redistributed if you decide someone else deserves them more. It was about maintaining a hierarchy where Maya's needs will always trump Chloe's rights. Eleanor was full-on crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. You're making me out to be some kind of abusive parent. I've done my best. Do you have any idea how hard it is raising two daughters with completely different personalities and needs? Yes, actually, my grandmother said. We raised two daughters ourselves. Your sister, Janet, was easy, responsible, studious, never caused problems. You were more challenging, impulsive, emotional, constantly in some kind of crisis. And you know what we didn't do? We didn't give Janet less love and attention because she required less maintenance. We didn't punish her confidence by giving her fewer resources. We didn't redistribute her belongings to you because you needed them more. The comparison clearly stung. Eleanor had spent years playing the victim, casting herself as the parent struggling with an ungrateful daughter. Having her own mother call out the pattern publicly was a shock to her system. My grandfather pulled out his phone and made another call, this time to his lawyer, Michael Chin. He put it on speaker. Michael, it's Arthur Winters. I need you to start drafting an amendment to our will. Effective immediately, we're reallocating portions of Eleanor's inheritance to establish a trust for our granddaughter, Chloe. I'll email you the specific amounts later today, but I want the paperwork started now. Understood, Arthur, Michael's voice came through clearly. I'll have the preliminary documents ready by Monday. Will you need this expedited? Yes, I want everything finalized within 2 weeks. Consider it done. My grandfather ended the call and looked at Eleanor. That trust will be irrevocable, Eleanor. When Susan and I pass, Chloe will be provided for, regardless of what you or Daniel do. She'll have money for a house, for emergencies, for building a life without having to constantly struggle. Consider it compensation for the inheritance of parental love and support that she should have received but didn't. Eleanor stood abruptly, her purse clutched to her chest like a shield. Fine, you've made your point. You've humiliated me, threatened to disinherit me, and turned my own daughter against me. I hope you're satisfied. No one turned Chloe against you, my grandmother said quietly. You did that yourself. One dismissal at a time, one redistribution of affection at a time. We're just finally acknowledging reality. Eleanor stormed toward the door, then stopped and turned back to me. Her expression was a mixture of rage and something that might have been hurt. You couldn't just handle this privately, could you? You had to run to your grandparents and make me look like a villain. You've always been so good at playing the victim. The accusation was so absurd, so completely inverted from reality that I almost laughed. But I was too tired, too emotionally wrung out. Instead, I just looked at her steadily. "I came here today by taxi because I don't have my car," I said calmly. "The car that was given to me as a gift and then taken away. That's not playing the victim. That's stating a fact. Everything that happened after that was Grandpa Arthur's choice, not mine. You could have handled this like an adult instead of tattling to your grandparents. I tried for 3 months. I tried. I asked nicely. I asked firmly. I sent text messages and made phone calls and showed up at your house. You refused to listen. You refused to return my property. What exactly was I supposed to do?" She had no answer for that. With a final glare at all of us, she stalked out, the front door slamming behind her with enough force to rattle the framed photos on the nearby table. My grandfather continued, "Furthermore, family gatherings will be interesting from now on. Chloe will always be invited. Eleanor and Daniel, your invitations are conditional on you treating Chloe with basic respect and dignity. Maya is still welcome. She's young and has been raised with warped values, but she can still learn better if she chooses to." He stood up and put his hand on my shoulder. "Chloe, I'm sorry we didn't see this clearly before. I'm sorry we didn't protect you from this mistreatment. That changes now." I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. I'd been strong for so long, pushing down the hurt and telling myself it didn't matter, that I was being too sensitive. Having someone validate my experience, having someone stand up for me without qualifications or conditions, it broke something open in my chest. My grandmother hugged me, and then my grandfather joined in. For the first time in years, I felt truly safe. Eleanor stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Daniel called back several times, trying to negotiate or explain, but Arthur ignored the calls. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about other things: my work at the hospital, their recent trip to the coast, my grandmother's book club, normal family things, without the undercurrent of tension I'd grown so accustomed to. That evening, the BMW was delivered to my apartment building. I went downstairs to meet the driver, and there it was, my car, exactly as I'd left it 3 months ago, except with fast food wrappers in the backseat and the gas tank on empty. I didn't even care. It was mine again. The aftermath was predictably dramatic. Maya called me crying, accusing me of ruining her life and being vindictive. Eleanor sent long text messages about betrayal and turning grandparents against parents. Daniel tried the reasonable approach, asking if we could all just move past this without anyone actually apologizing or acknowledging what had happened. I blocked Eleanor's number. I told Daniel that I'd be willing to have a relationship with him if he went to family therapy with me, which he declined. Maya, I left unblocked, hoping she might eventually understand, but I didn't hold my breath. Some extended family members tried to guilt me about causing family drama and being unforgiving. Aunt Bethany called me selfish again and said I was destroying the family over material possessions. I politely explained the situation once, and when she continued to blame me, I stopped taking her calls, too. But there were surprises. My cousin Ethan reached out to tell me he'd experienced similar favoritism with his siblings and understood exactly what I was going through. A few of my grandmother's friends, who had apparently heard about the situation, made a point of telling me how proud they were that I'd stood up for myself. Even some of my coworkers, when they heard an abbreviated version of the story, were outraged on my behalf. The following month, my grandparents made good on their promises. Their lawyer contacted me about the trust fund they'd established for when they passed, and they also set up an account with $50,000 in it for immediate use. They told me to use it for anything I needed: rent, student loans, emergency expenses, or even just fun things I'd been denying myself. "You've worked so hard," my grandmother said when we had lunch together the next week. "You deserve to enjoy your life, not just survive it." With some of that money, I paid off a chunk of my student loans. I also bought myself a nice laptop to replace the dying one I'd been using since college, and I booked a weekend trip to the mountains with some friends from work, something I'd never felt I could afford before. But the biggest change was internal. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel guilty about taking up space or having nice things. I didn't feel like I had to apologize for existing or constantly prove my worth. My grandparents had given me something more valuable than money or a car. They'd given me validation and the understanding that I deserved to be treated with respect. The holiday season approached with trepidation. Thanksgiving had always been hosted at my parents' house, and I wasn't sure how to handle it. My grandmother solved the problem by announcing that she and my grandfather would be hosting instead at their estate. "Everyone is invited," she said when she called to tell me. "But there will be ground rules: no discussing the car situation, no passive-aggressive comments, no playing favorites. Anyone who can't abide by those rules can leave." Thanksgiving Day arrived, cold and bright. I drove to my grandparents' house in my BMW, which I had detailed and serviced. It felt like a small act of defiance, but mostly it just felt good to have reliable transportation again. My parents were already there when I arrived, sitting stiffly in the living room. Eleanor wouldn't look at me. Daniel gave me a weak smile and a nod. Maya wasn't there. She'd chosen to have Thanksgiving with her boyfriend's family, which was probably for the best. Other relatives arrived: my Uncle Pete and his wife, some second cousins, my grandmother's sister. The atmosphere was tense at first, but my grandmother was a force of nature, keeping conversation flowing and steering away from dangerous topics. Dinner was elaborate and delicious. My grandmother had outdone herself with a turkey and all the fixings. We sat around the massive dining table, and my grandfather said grace, adding a pointed line about being grateful for family who showed up for each other in meaningful ways. Eleanor flinched but said nothing. After dinner, while people were having coffee and pie in the living room, my grandfather asked me to step outside onto the back patio with him. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "How are you really doing?" he asked, his breath fogging in the cold air. "Better," I said. "Honestly. It's still hard sometimes. I miss having a normal family, or at least the illusion of one, but I don't miss feeling like garbage all the time." He nodded. "Your grandmother and I have been talking. We want you to know that no matter what happens with your parents, you'll always have us. And when we're gone, you'll be taken care of. We've made sure of it." "Please don't talk about being gone," I said, my voice cracking. "You're two of the only people who have ever really seen me." "Then we did something right," he said, pulling me into a hug. "And you're going to do amazing things, Chloe. Don't let anyone dim your light." We stood there for a moment, and I thought about the scared, exhausted version of myself from a few months ago who'd let someone take her car keys because she was too beaten down to fight anymore. That version felt like a different person now. Inside, I could hear laughter and conversation. Eleanor was talking to her sister about something innocuous, her voice strained but civil. Daniel was showing my Uncle Pete something on his phone. The family gathering continued, awkward but functional, held together by my grandparents' sheer will and clear boundaries. Over the following months, things shifted into a new normal. Eleanor eventually sent a short apology text that read more like, "I'm sorry you were hurt," than "I'm sorry for what I did," but it was something. We maintained a distant, cordial relationship, birthday texts, the occasional holiday gathering, nothing deeper. Daniel and I went to 2 therapy sessions together before he stopped showing up, claiming work conflicts. I let it go. Maya and I eventually had a conversation about 6 months after the car incident. She called me out of the blue one evening, her voice small. "I didn't realize how bad it was for you," she said. "Growing up, I mean. Mom always made it seem like you were just difficult, like you chose to be unhappy, but I've been thinking about it more and I remember things differently now. Things that didn't seem significant at the time, but I don't know. I'm sorry I took the car. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you. It wasn't everything I needed to hear, but it was genuine." We made plans to get coffee, taking small steps toward rebuilding some kind of relationship. She'd started therapy herself and was working through her own realizations about our family dynamics. As for me, I threw myself into my work and my life. I got a promotion at the hospital, taking a position in the cardiac unit I'd been eyeing for over a year. I started dating someone I met through a friend, a teacher named David, who was kind and stable and treated me like I mattered. I took up painting again, something I'd loved as a teenager but abandoned because Eleanor always made dismissive comments about it being a waste of time. My grandparents remained my anchors. Dinner at their house every other Sunday became a tradition. Sometimes it was just the three of us. Sometimes other family members joined. They celebrated my wins and supported me through my struggles, asking nothing in return except that I live authentically and refuse to accept mistreatment. One Sunday afternoon, about a year after the car incident, my grandfather and I were sitting on their back porch again. It had become our spot for real conversations. "You know what I'm most proud of?" he asked suddenly. "What?" "That you didn't let bitterness consume you. You could have become angry and vindictive. Instead, you set boundaries, protected yourself, and kept your heart open to the people who deserved it. That takes real strength." I smiled. "I learned from the best." "No," he said, shaking his head. "That was all you, kiddo. We just reminded you of what you already knew." Looking back now, I can see that day, the day I arrived by taxi and my mother so casually announced she'd given away my car, as a turning point. Not because of the car itself, but because it was the moment my grandparents finally saw the full picture of what had been happening. It was the moment someone in my family chose me unequivocally and without conditions. The BMW still runs great. I take good care of it now, regular maintenance and everything. But it's become more than transportation. Every time I slide into the driver's seat, I remember that I'm worth fighting for. I remember that boundaries aren't selfish, that self-respect isn't optional, and that family should build you up, not tear you down. My grandfather is 80 now. My grandmother's 77. They're still sharp and active, still hosting Sunday dinners and taking trips and living their lives fully. But I know that someday, probably sooner than I'd like, they won't be here anymore. When that day comes, I'll grieve deeply. But I'll also carry forward the greatest gift they gave me. The knowledge that I deserve to take up space in this world, to have my own things, to be treated with dignity and love. And whenever someone tries to diminish me or make me feel small, I'll remember my grandfather's face that day, the quiet fury, the decisive action, the absolute refusal to let his granddaughter be treated as less than. I'll remember that sometimes love means drawing hard lines and holding people accountable. I'll remember that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. The taxi ride that started this whole chain of events cost me $23. The year of boundary setting and family drama that followed cost me relationships with people who never truly valued me. But what I gained was priceless: self-respect, validation, and the unshakable knowledge that I am enough, exactly as I am. Eleanor still doesn't fully understand what she did wrong. Daniel remains conflict avoidant, preferring peace at any cost over actual justice. Maya is learning and growing, slowly, rebuilding trust. And me? I'm driving forward, literally and metaphorically, in the car my grandparents gave me as a symbol of their love and pride. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or public humiliation. Sometimes it's simply reclaiming what was yours, setting boundaries that protect your peace, and living well despite the people who try to make you small. Sometimes it's having someone in your corner who sees clearly, acts decisively, and reminds you that you are never the problem. That's exactly what my grandfather did. And it made me truly, deeply proud, not just of him, but of myself, for finally accepting the support I deserved all along. What part of this story resonates with you the most?